Hey, I'm Olivia,
And hey, I'm Dad.
and you're listening to Soarin' Around WDW. Hello, hello, flight crew. We are here today to kick off a brand new section of a series that you all absolutely loved last year and the year prior, which is our Parks of the Past, Present, and Future series. Back when we started the podcast, I had this idea to start going through all of the things that had been offered at the Walt Disney World parks that are no longer, things that they have now, and things we want to see. And that is how our Parks of the Past, Parks of the Present, and Parks of the Future series were born. We went through every single park, everything that used to be there, things we experienced and things we hadn't, as well as current offerings, and that includes attractions, shows, restaurants, everything. It was really fun, and my Disney history nerd brain loved every minute of it, and you guys really did love it too. So, Dad, if you had to guess, which episode do you think was the most popular from our past series?
I'm thinking it must have had something to do with the Magic Kingdom, but that's just a thought.
So that's what I thought too. And when I went back and looked at the number of listens for those episodes, EPCOT was actually the winner, which really
Oh,
surprised
wow.
me.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you go back and look at our podcast feed, each of those episodes for each park, we did multiple episodes. So there were actually multiple of the Epcot episodes in the higher ranked out of that series. So I thought that was pretty funny. I guess people really like to hear about the history of Epcot, which will tie into our episode a little bit today, too. So go back and give those a listen if you're interested in that, or if you have a lot of memories of the parks as the way they were. But at the end of present, we also would rank all of the experiences as far as what we loved the most and what we loved the least. So now we're going to keep that series going and add behind the scenes tours to the list. I hinted at this a little bit in our Kilimanjaro Safaris episode when we were talking about those tours, but today we're going to start with the past tour offerings, and next week will be part two of these previous tours. Then we'll move on to what they currently offer or the present offerings, and these are specifically at Walt Disney World. These are going to be intermingled with some other episodes because, as I've said a few times, we have our France trip coming up and we are about to hit our 100th episode really soon, which is so wild. And that means our 2 year podiversary is right around the corner as well in less than 2 months from this episode airing, which is really crazy. Can you believe that, Dad, that it's been almost 100 episodes?
No, actually, I was kind of shocked when you said that because I don't really follow the number of episodes when I kind of listen to them later. But
Yeah.
that's pretty good. It's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And Dad's been along for the ride for almost all 100. I mean, he started really early on with me. So it's been really fun for the two of us to do this, but more to come on that on our 100th episode. Today is episode number 96, I think. So in just a few weeks, we're going to have a special episode, which of course comes with an extra special giveaway. More to come on that here in the future. But for now, let's jump into our new series. We're going to kick off our Parks of the Past behind the scenes tours with one of the most legendary experiences that Disney has ever offered, and that is the Backstage Magic Tour. The Backstage Magic Tour ran at Walt Disney World for almost 20 years. The highly popular 7 hour behind the scenes experience started in the early 2000s until it was suspended because of course, COVID-19 and the pandemic in 2020. It never officially returned to the park schedule after that. This was not a quick add on or a small walking tour. This was a full, immersive, approximately 7 hour deep dive into how Walt Disney World actually works behind the scenes. It typically started around 8:30 in the morning and ran through multiple parks and backstage facilities, giving guests access to areas that most people never even knew existed. And this was definitely a premium experience. Towards the end of its run, the most up-to-date pricing that we could find put it at about $275 per person, with possible discounts for annual pass holders. So, yeah, it was not cheap, but from everything we've seen, this was absolutely one of those tours that even the most skeptical Disney fans walked away saying it was 100% worth it. You had to be 16 years old, and the tour was offered usually a few times a week on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, starting at 8:30 or 9 in the morning.
The day would begin at EPCOT, right near guest relations, where small groups capped at around 20 people would meet their guide. That smaller group size already set the tone for something more personal and in depth. Almost immediately, guests were taken backstage, and one of the first big realizations hits you. Backstage Disney looks nothing like what the guests see. There's no music, no themed landscaping, no forced perspective, just functional buildings and working areas. It's a completely different world. But then Disney balances that reality with comfort. Guests would board a private air-conditioned tour bus that stayed with the group throughout the day. Chilled bottled water was available the entire time. There was even a space to store personal drinks. On a hot Florida day, that alone was a huge perk and something many guests didn't expect. From there, the tour moved behind Epcot's World Showcase to the American Adventure Pavilion. Or even stepping inside, the guide would explain some incredible details about the building itself, like how it was originally planned to sit between Canada and Mexico, symbolically placing them north and south of the United States. The idea was scrapped because the building needed to be much larger to house the attraction, so it became the centerpiece instead. Also learned that unlike most Disney structures that are designed to look bigger, this one uses reverse forced perspective to appear smaller and fit in with the surrounding pavilions. The materials matter. Over 100,000 hand-formed bricks, and the flag on top reflects a specific moment in American history with 15 stars, 15 stripes.
Then came one of the most exclusive parts of the tour, going backstage inside the pavilion to see how the American Adventure Show actually operates. Massive show systems, complex mechanics, and the kind of engineering that most guests never even think about when they are all on display. This wasn't surface level trivia, this was real, in depth insight into Disney's technical magic. After that, the tour would stop at an EPCOT cast member building, which served as a hub for employee operations. This part was surprisingly fascinating because it would show how much infrastructure really exists just to support cast members. Costuming, lockers, break areas, training spaces, it's essentially a behind the scenes city. One of the more unique details is that Disney even tested different types of carpet in this building, using thousands of cast members walking through daily as a way to measure durability before installing it in resorts, ships, or parks. From Epcot, the group would head over to what is now Disney's Hollywood Studios for a deep dive into costuming. This is where guests got to see how Disney costumes are designed, created, and maintained, not just for Walt Disney World, but often for other Disney parks around the world. The level of detail here is absolutely incredible. From handcrafted pieces to proprietary fabrics and even trademarked colors, everything is carefully controlled to maintain consistency and quality. Guests would also see advanced technology in action, like the massive automated cutting tables that would precisely cut and label fabric pieces for hundreds of identical costumes. There was even an insight into how original attractions designed are digitally recreated to ensure that the replacements or refurbishments are perfectly accurate down to the smallest detail. It really drives home how much effort goes into things that guests might only really see for a few seconds.
Lunch was included as part of the tour, typically served family style at a park restaurant. Multiple courses, plenty of food, and a chance to relax for a bit before heading into the second half of the day. And that second half is where the tour really became unforgettable. The group would head backstage at Magic Kingdom, going through multiple security checkpoints along the way. A reminder that even behind the scenes, Disney maintains strict safety protocols. One of the first stops was a Christmas warehouse, which is exactly what it sounds like. A massive storage and refurbishment space for all the holiday decorations used across Walt Disney World. Where the ceiling shelves of trees, wreaths, garlands, and ornaments filled the space, all carefully organized and maintained. It's a year-round operation dedicated entirely to Christmas magic.
From there, the tour passed through the floral department where the iconic resort arrangements are created. Guests could watch cast members assembling large scale floral displays and even learn little known details, like when certain resort arrangements are swapped out during the week. Then came one of the biggest highlights, Central Shops. This is essentially the creative and mechanical heart of Walt Disney World. It's where ride vehicles are built and repaired, where props are fabricated, where signage is painted, and where molds for iconic attraction figures are created. Walking through this space meant seeing Disney craftsmanship in action, everything from restoring carousel horses to building large-scale themed elements. This area also included the Audio-Animatronics workshop, where guests learned about the evolution of animatronic technology from early simple figures like the ones in the Enchanted Tiki Room to highly advanced models using attractions like the Hall of Presidents, and seeing that progression in person gave a whole new appreciation for how far Disney technology has really come.
And then one of the most iconic parts of the entire tour, the Utilidors. These are the corridors beneath Magic Kingdom that allow cast members to move throughout the park unseen, preserving the immersive guest experience. What's fascinating is that they aren't technically underground. They're actually the first floor of the park. Magic Kingdom was built on top of them using excavated earth for the creation of nearby waterways. So when guests walk down Main Street, they're actually on the second level. Getting to walk through the system is something most Disney fans only ever hear about, and this tour made it a reality. The experience would wrap up back on stage in the Magic Kingdom, often near Main Street, sometimes even time so guests could catch the afternoon parade for a great viewing spot. At the end of the day, participants received an exclusive commemorative pin, something that could not be purchased and was only given to those who completed the tour.
Looking at everything included, which is 7 hours, multiple parks, backstage access, transportation, lunch, and incredibly rare experiences, it's really easy to see why this tour became so beloved. What's especially interesting is that many people went in thinking that they already knew everything about Disney, only to come out very surprised. Instead of ruining the magic, it actually deepened it. It showed just how much thought, effort, and craftsmanship goes into every single detail across Walt Disney World. And that's really why Backstage Magic stands out as one of the most missed and most talked about tours that Disney has ever offered. It gives fans a chance to not just see the magic itself, but the people, processes, and passion that make it all possible. Wow, I mean, we are really starting off with a bang with this tour. So, when I first told you about doing this series, this was the very first tour that came to mind, Dad, and you mentioned it right away. So, what are your thoughts on this tour and what had you heard about it kind of back in the day?
Well, I remember, I think it was not long after I first did the Keys to the Kingdom tour, early 2000s. Um, I read about this. I thought, oh, I would love to do that 7 hours. And you're going to all these different parks and American Adventure, behind the scenes. Uh, yeah, I was like, but then the price was, even then, it was like the price of an annual pass. So
Mm.
we already had annual passes for the whole family and with the four of us. So, that's already a little bit of an outlay. So I just couldn't justify doing it, but I really wanted to do it. And I think if it came back, I might have to figure out how to do that tour, or we'll have to do it together or something because it just sounds amazing to me.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely would have to do it together. And I'm surprised that it hasn't come back after COVID because it was so popular. And I remember hearing about, like you said, specifically the American Adventure piece where you get to go underneath and see behind the scenes things and Hollywood studios and the costuming and just very unique opportunities, but also getting to see Utilidors again, which is one of the best parts of the Keys of the Kingdom tour. So, yeah, I agree. I hope that they do bring this one back. It's makes me a little encouraged that it hasn't been gone that long, that they might bring it back someday. And honestly, as we get into more tours over the next few weeks, the price now, if it stayed at 275, which I guess it maybe wouldn't, but that's not horrible when you're thinking about some of the other costs of these other tours that we're going to get into. But yeah, it's definitely a really cool one, and that would be a bucket list item for sure to get to complete that. Out of everything on the tour, what do you think would have been the biggest wow moment for Disney fans? Is it the Utilidors, the American Adventure show systems? Kind of which section would intrigue you the most?
I would think if you didn't do the Keys to the Kingdom, if you've never been in the Utilidors, it's got to be the big thing, right? Because you just can't get
Yeah.
access down there. Let's just try to sneak down there, and that's not a good idea. So
Yeah.
nobody sneak down there. But if you've seen the Utilidors, I think going to see the American Adventure, the ride, it's not really the ride system, it's the carousel that goes around and brings the different scenes up in the show, and you can kind of see how that operates below the surface of the stage
Yeah.
from what I read. I thought, oh, that would be great. I love behind the scenes, how things operate. So I think that would probably be the next thing. And beyond that, the Christmas warehouse. How cool is that, right? Go and see that and see all the Christmas stuff there. I'm a big Christmas guy, of course, so that would be fun too. But I would say Utilidors would be the big showstopper on that tour.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely the Utilidors if you haven't done Keys to the Kingdom, but everything else, like really each element of this tour is really cool and very behind the scenes and things that people really don't see every day. So I feel like each stop had a really cool and interesting part to it for sure. And as much as the Christmas warehouse is cool, I would love to see all the Halloween stuff all put out and
Yeah,
to
there
put
you go.
in. That
There
is
you go.
my cup of tea. So if Disney brought back Backstage Magic today, what modern backstage area would you think or would you want added to the tour? Something like Galaxy's Edge technology, a modern animatronic, or like this Imagineering style ride development. Is there anything else that you think would be cool to add?
Well, probably no surprise to you or our listeners that have listened to some of the attractions that we both like. Well, how about a little back behind the scenes of Tower of Terror? How
Ooh,
about a little behind the
yeah.
scenes of the Haunted Mansion? Just a little taste of
Mm-hmm.
it, right? Some back door where you could see some of the ride vehicles and how they're operating and get behind the scenes. Um, I think that would be would just push it. They probably have to charge another $100 to do something like that,
Yeah.
but I'd pay it. I'd pay it. Let's do it. So yeah, I would think a Tower of Terror or something behind the scenes of some major attractions beyond the American Venture would be super cool.
Yeah, I agree. And I even thought about to add a different element, like the behind the scenes of one of the shows. So maybe watching a show from backstage, like Beauty and the Beast, and seeing how they get the performers out there and how they change
Yes,
their
yes.
costumes. Like that could be really cool too, and just
Good
a
idea.
different element. So that's kind of what I had thought about.
Great idea. Another really unique and honestly underrated entry in the world of Disney's behind the scene tours was the magic behind our Steam Trains tour. Compared to something like Backstage Magic, this one was shorter, more focused, and way more affordable, but still packed with detail and history that most guests never even think about. This tour ran about 3 hours, started bright and early at 7:30 in the morning, and cost around $54 per person, not including tax. It was typically offered Monday through Saturday, required a valid park ticket, and was open to guests ages 10 and up. You'd check in just outside the Magic Kingdom turnstiles about 15 minutes before the tour began, which already made it feel a little special because you were getting into the park before it officially opened.
I do think that's like one of the coolest parts, which we can talk about, is being in the park before anybody else. That's like so special and almost worth like that
Yes,
piece of admission right there. But after that,
I agree.
and the and the early entry was actually one of the first highlights, as I just said. Walking down an almost empty Main Street, USA is something most guests rarely experience, and it set the tone for a tour that felt a little more personal, a little more insider from the very beginning. After a quick introduction from the guide, the group would board one of the Walt Disney World Railroad trains, often the Roy O. Disney, and take a ride around the park. But this wasn't just a scenic loop. Throughout the ride, the guide would go deep into the history of the four steam trains that operate at Walt Disney World, which are the Lily Bell, Roy O. Disney, Roger E. Brogy, and Walter E. Disney. And these aren't replicas; they're authentic steam trains from the early 20th century. Disney found them in Mexico in the late 1960s, brought them back to the United States, and fully restored them. That alone is such a cool piece of history, especially when you realize that you've probably ridden them without ever even knowing their story. One of the standout names you'd hear about is Roger E. Brogy, who played a huge role in finding and restoring the trains. He's often considered one of the very first Imagineers, and his legacy is deeply tied to Walt Disney's personal love of railroads. And that love is really the heart of this entire tour. Walt Disney was famously passionate about trains. He even built his own miniature railroad in his backyard in California. So the railroad at Magic Kingdom isn't just transportation or a scenic ride, it's something deeply personal that he carried over into the parks.
After circling Magic Kingdom, the tour would do something guests almost never get to experience. It would leave the park and head backstage to the roundhouse, where the trains are stored, maintained, and prepared for daily operation. This is where the tour really becomes the behind the scenes experience. You're stepping into a working environment where engineers inspect, repair, and service these massive steam engines every single day. And while it's called a roundhouse, it's actually more of a storage and service bay where the trains are backed in rather than arranged in a circle. Guests would get incredibly close to the trains, close enough to really appreciate their size, complexity, and the amount of work it takes to keep them running. You'd hear about the daily inspection process, the maintenance routines, and what it takes to safely operate these historic machines in a modern theme park.
One of the coolest moments described by guests is getting up onto the train itself to see the engine components up close. It's hot, it's tight, and it's very clear that this is not an easy job. Each train is operated by both an engineer and a fireman, and they typically rotate out every 90 minutes because of the intense heat and physical demands. There were also some unexpected bonuses during this portion of the tour. Since the roundhouse area is shared with other transportation systems, guests sometimes got to see the monorails up close, occasionally even watching one depart from the maintenance area overhead, which is a perspective that you really just don't get anywhere else.
After exploring backstage, the group would return to the Main Street train station just as the park was getting ready to open to day guests. The final portion of the tour focused more on storytelling, with the guide diving deeper into Walt Disney's lifelong fascination with trains and how that passion directly influenced the creation of Disneyland and eventually Walt Disney World. It's a quieter ending compared to the backstage excitement. It really ties everything together. You walk away not just knowing how the trains work, but understanding why they're there in the first place. And that's really what made this tour special. It wasn't about big thrills or massive access, multiple parks. It was about focusing in on one specific piece of Disney history and giving it the depth it deserves.
The magic behind our steam trains tour originally ran from about 1999 and continued for many years, operating multiple times a week. It was paused when the Disneyland Railroad itself closed in 2018 for construction related to Tron. And while the railroad reopened in 2022, the tour unfortunately never returned after that COVID shutdown. So it ended in 2019, it's in 2018 itself. As of now, it remains another one of those experiences that longtime Disney fans remember fondly. It may not have had the scale of something like Backstage Magic, but for fans of Walt Disney, Magic Kingdom, history, or even just unique behind the scenes experiences, this was absolutely a hidden gem. So, do you think this tour would appeal more to hardcore Disney fans, train enthusiasts, general park guests, or all of the above? Like, where do you think this one would hit most?
I've got to go with the Disney history fans. I think probably a few places around the United States where you can get a in-depth steam train tour,
Mm-hmm.
the background and everything. So this is all related to Disney something, and Disney history fans first, and then train enthusiasts probably second. I think the average fan wouldn't get too excited about this unless they had some interest in trains. Just my thought.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think the price is definitely appealing because it's way less expensive than a lot of the tours that we've talked about. But what is more interesting to you, the actual backstage mechanics of maintaining these historic steam trains, or is it the connection that the railroad has to Walt Disney personally?
I got to go with the connection it has to Walt Disney only because we're at Disney World, we're Disney fans. Even though
Yeah.
it's great to see the history of the steam trains, I remember hearing a while ago that they got them from Mexico and refurbished them and rebuilt them. But I like the connection, fascination with trains and his love of trains.
Yeah, I agree. And they do have one, a similar tour. They were running it actually when we were there for part of the 70th, I think, over at Disneyland, where you get to ride in like the special Lily Bell cart that is like a little bit unique. It's like the presidential cart. I don't know exactly what it's called. Disneyland people don't kill me for not remembering this, but we didn't get to do the tour. But I was like, oh, well, that would be kind of neat to experience, especially there because that's the original park. But I do think there's something unique and special about each of the railroads at the parks across the world. So it would definitely be cool to see. If Disney was going to revive this tour today, what extra experience do you think would make it even better? Some things that I thought about were maybe seeing like the trains fired up before the park opening, visiting other transportation backstage areas like an entire Disney transportation tour where you do go see more of the monorails, the Skyliner, the boats, or something like that. Just a thought, but maybe people wouldn't be into that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on how else they could like plus this tour?
Let them ride up with the engineer
Oh,
for an extra,
yeah.
maybe an extra cost, right? You have to throw an extra cost in there, like a fast, yeah, I don't know. Because you can only probably fit one or two people up there with the engineer, but how fun would it be to go up there and ride with the engineer, right? And see how he's doing the
Yeah.
controls and everything. That could be almost a tour in itself. I realize they're limited, but they have a couple trains running, during the day at one time. So yeah, who knows? But that's just something that came to mind. And I like your idea of doing something uh, tour of like boats or something. There's definitely some dry dock areas back behind like the Haunted Mansion back there, in a waterway where they can, or maybe it's behind Pirates of the Caribbean if I remember right, in the Parade warehouse area. But so you could do different, like you mentioned, different types of transportation behind the scenes tours, the monorail, Skyliner boats, and things like that would be awesome. Also, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot to learn about the way that Disney transportation operates. So that would be super interesting. Another tour that's really interesting to look back on, especially because it changed so much over time, is the UnDISCOVERed Future World Tour at EPCOT. This was a 4 hour walking tour focused on the original vision and evolution of Future World. It blended on-stage storytelling with some genuinely cool backstage access. It typically cost around $69 per person, with discounts available, of course, for annual pass holders and DVC members, as well as Disney Visa card holders, and it was geared towards guests 16 and older. It initially started being offered in July 2000. However, like a lot of these tours, it ultimately disappeared after the 2020 shutdown and hasn't returned since. On paper, this tour sounds exactly like what a Disney fan would want: an in-depth look at Walt Disney's original idea for Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, mixed with backstage access and a few VIP style perks. And to be fair, parts of it absolutely delivered on that promise from what I was reading. But this is one of those tours where the experience could be maybe a little uneven depending on when you took it or what exactly was included at the time of your tour.
The tour would begin in Future World, often near Innoventions, and the first portion lead heavily into Disney history, specifically Walt himself. There was a long introductory segment, sometimes close to 30 minutes, covering everything from early animation to Mickey Mouse and the company's origins. Now, that's all interesting stuff, but a common criticism was that a lot of it didn't really connect back to Epcot as much as you would expect. For a tour that's supposed to focus on the creation and vision of Future World, spending that much time on general Disney history felt a bit off. From there, the group would move through the Future World stage, stopping at different pavilions, while the guide shared a mix of historical facts and present day insights. This portion included experiences like riding Spaceship Earth, priority access, and visiting areas like the Coral Reef restaurant before it opened for the day. There were definitely some cool details sprinkled in, little design elements, billion backstories, but for more hardcore fans, a lot of this material you'll feel like you might already know or could easily learn elsewhere. About halfway through, there was usually a short break at the land pavilion, giving guests a chance to grab a snack or just recharge for a bit. And honestly, this is where many people felt like the tour started to shift gears in a good way.
The second half is where the undiscovered future world really began to shine. This is when the backstage access piece really kicked in. Guests would head behind the scenes near Journey into Imagination and get a look at areas like maintenance bays and even the facilities where 3D glasses were cleaned. It's the kind of everyday operational detail that you never think about, but once you see it, it adds a whole new layer to how the park functions and appreciation for the cast members. From there, the tour often included a visit to the VIP sponsor lounge, like the one inside Mission Space. These lounges are typically off limits to regular guests, so just stepping inside one felt like a pretty special experience. And then came another big highlight: backstage access at Test Track, followed by priority access to ride it. That combination of seeing how something works and then immediately experiencing it as a guest is always a win.
But the real standout moment for a lot of people came next, the cast services building. This is where the tour went deep into costuming and character support, and it ended up being one of the most memorable parts of the entire experience. Inside, you'd find rows upon rows of costumes for different pavilions and attractions, along with areas where cast members were actively creating, repairing, and maintaining them. You could also see elements like wigs for face characters and even catch glimpses of the preparation that goes into bringing characters to life. It's one of those rare moments where the illusion is pulled back just enough to be fascinating without completely breaking the magic. Another really unique feature in this area was something called Light Hall, a hallway filled with murals created by different EPCOT departments, each representing their team in creative ways. It's a small detail, clearly highlighted personality and creativity of the cast members behind the scenes. Backstage portion was also included glimpses of older audio-animatronics and artifacts from past attractions, which for longtime fans was a huge highlight. Seeing pieces of Disney history up close, even briefly, added a sense of nostalgia and depth that the first half of the tour sometimes lacked. The tour would eventually wrap up on Backstage, usually near Future World, where guests would return their headsets and receive a commemorative pin to mark the experience.
Those commemorative pins, that is like totally my jam. I'm very into the commemorative pins. So, looking at the tour as a whole, it really was a mixed bag, but an interesting one. The biggest criticism that I read that most people had wasn't necessarily the price, but how the time was used, because that first half could kind of feel a little slow or surface level, especially for really big, dedicated Disney history fans, while the second half delivered really what people were hoping for, that behind the scenes, unique VIP access and memorable experiences. So it's also worth noting that this tour really changed over the years. Earlier versions reportedly included extensive backstage access, like areas of Journey into the Imagination or Universe of Energy, but those elements were removed as attractions closed or were reimagined. So instead of fully replacing that part of the experience, the tour leaned more on the on-stage walking and storytelling, which doesn't always hit that same level of excitement. But still, at only $69, it's a pretty affordable way to get backstage glimpses at Epcot, especially compared to higher end tours like Backstage Magic, which was much, much more expensive, as we just talked about. And for guests who hadn't already deep dived into Epcot history, there was definitely value there. And ultimately, the Undiscovered Future World is a great example of how these tours could evolve and sometimes struggle to keep up with a changing park. At its best, it offered a really cool mix of history, access, and exclusive experiences. At its worst, it felt a little like two different tours stitched together. But for fans who got to experience that second half, the backstage areas, the costuming department, the hidden spaces, that's really the part that seemed to stick with them. And like so many of these discontinued tours, it's another reminder of just how many unique ways there used to be to explore the parks really beyond the attractions themselves. Dad, now this was a tour you actually did participate in back in the day, is that right?
Yes, I'm thinking maybe 2001, so a long time ago, 25 years ago, but
Oh, wow.
uh, it didn't hit me like it did. Before that, I did Keys to the Kingdom, I think the year before the first time. Obviously, it's a different price than Keys to the Kingdom,
Yeah.
uh, big time, right? The $69, that was about what it was, if I remember right. I enjoyed it, but the description is correct. The first part was pretty much just a history, walking around in the guest areas, um, talking about things that, being a real big Disney history fan, I already knew everything the guy was telling me already.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to get backstage on one of the attractions, and we did get backstage on Universe of Energy. Got a chance
Oh.
to, while it was in operation, which was pretty cool because he kept saying, "We're back there by the dinosaurs." And it was dark and you're kind of tripping over each other, and he'd be like, okay, come back here, there's a group of people going by and they're they're big, ride vehicles. Remember how big those big ride vehicles were? Huge.
Were they
And they were
similar
kind of,
kind of like Great Movie Ride size? Is that like
oh, way
bigger?
bigger than that. It's like a
Okay.
stage area that kind of broke into these different sections, and they would start moving ahead. I'm guessing 30, 40 people on one ride vehicle. I mean, a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
people. You have to do some YouTube check on that, but it's pretty, there are a lot of people on the ride. And anyway, so we would hide back behind the dinosaurs and let the people go by, and then come out and look a little bit more. We weren't out on the track itself, but we could see all the different dinosaurs of them moving, and I thought that was cool just to be because you're behind the scenes. You're coming to the back door, and you got
Yeah.
to see some different cast member areas and stuff. Probably where they had a little lounge area, if I remember right. So that was cool. Um, I'm trying to remember. I know there wasn't a lunch or anything for $69. You're not getting a lunch, right? Because it costs you $69 just for the
Yeah.
lunch.
Yeah.
But we did go down to the land pavilion and go down stairs there at the Sunshine. It was called the Sunshine Seasons or something at the time.
I think it's
I
still
guess
called that.
still called that. And yeah, you go over there and buy something if you want. So we go over there and grab a Coke or something or a chocolate chip cookie. I probably bought, just classic for me.
Yeah.
And it gave us 50 minutes to stuff something in our face, and then we'd move on to something else. But I thought for $69 was fun just to go back behind the scenes on an attraction. We did go in a lounge also, pass holder lounge that was in Spaceship Earth, if I remember. Yeah, Spaceship Earth, and see that
Ooh.
one. That's toward the front side of Spaceship Earth. You look up over the statue, the Disney statue. I think that's near the Moana water area there that they put in. And you look
Yeah.
up towards Spaceship Earth, you see that big window that wraps around. That's a lounge area up there. So we got a chance to go up there and kind of check that out. That was pretty fun too. But yeah, I don't remember it as fondly as the Keys to the Kingdom because there's really no comparison of the two. They're apples and oranges. But I thought for $69, it was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I would agree. Like you said, it's something that's less expensive, but still that backstage element. Do you feel like if you didn't get to experience the Ellen's Energy Adventure like attraction piece, if that was taken out, like it sounds like maybe after that closed and they were making it into Guardians, they removed that, would it still have been a worthwhile tour, or do you think they would have to replace it with some other kind of similar attraction experience?
Yeah, you still have to go behind the scenes of something, if I remember right. That and seeing the lounge, even though we were pass holders at the time, we could go into a lot of
Hmm.
those lounges already, right? So that wasn't like a big deal. Yeah, I'd say if you were not going to have backstage entrance into something there, I wouldn't even bother, to be honest.
Okay.
I think that would have been, I would have spent my $69 somewhere else.
Yeah. So do you think that this tour suffered because Epcot, like, could any future world focus tour really work once so many of the original pavilions were gone or reimagined? Like, Horizons was gone, and then, all these things changed so much, especially in that early 2000s, like to mid 2000s period. And now Future World is like gone entirely. So it's like called something totally different, which is, I mean, it's just broken up to like those different neighborhoods now. So do you feel like that could even work today with the way that Epcot is laid out now?
Well, obviously they'd have to call it something different that would tie in with all the different little areas that they have, like you mentioned. But I still think they could do something where that would tie in like a behind the scenes at Spaceship Earth. How cool would that be to go back behind
Yeah.
that? Or even Guardians, well, or Soarin'. I mean, there's all these cool attractions that are there now that, um, of course, Spaceship Earth's been there since the inception. I get that, but Guardians is relatively new, and Soarin' has been there a while. But so there's a lot of things they could still do and still offer a really good tour. It might cost, $99 now or $129 now, but I think if they did it right, I think it would be very popular. I would do it if they started going behind the scenes of some of those other attractions.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember when we did our Epcot Parks of the Present episodes and we talked about Spaceship Earth, we talked about how there's that elevator that they have to take to get up into the ball to go kind of like touch up different things with the animatronics. How cool would it be just to like get to ride that elevator and go up in there and see that, like you said, there's just so much going on in that attraction. That would be incredible.
I agree. Yeah, I if I had to go in an attraction in Epcot, it would be Spaceship Earth, hands down. Even more than American Adventure, because how iconic is the giant golf ball, as I call it, right?
Yeah.
It would be that would be super cool to see. I agree.
Is there a scene in Spaceship Earth that you would want to see the most if you got to get to step back like you did with the dinosaurs, but on Spaceship Earth? Like what
Ooh,
part of that
what
ride?
scene? What scene? Well, definitely not the caveman scene. That's kind of boring when you first start out.
Yeah.
Um, I uh, I don't. There's so many iconic scenes in that, right? I mean, and I'm trying to think. Um, Probably one of the scenes, surprisingly, that are up toward the top that are kind of when I was a kid, that are take place in the 60s or 70s, just to go in there and check that out. I know that sounds silly when you could go back and see things from Roman times, right? Or maybe even the Roman scene where you're smelling the
Oh
burning,
yeah.
right? They burn Rome, right? You can
Yeah.
smell the charred wood and everything. So maybe that seemed to be kind of cool. That area would be kind of cool to check out.
Yeah, I agree. That would be cool. And I also, as a kid, really loved the like 20s and 30s scene where they had all the telephones with the telephone board. And now the poor newspaper kid who's constantly facing backwards because I think his face got like burnt off or something. I don't know like what happened, but
I don't
now he's
know.
like facing backwards, but he didn't used to be. He used to face the right way. So
He he did. I don't know what happened to that poor boy.
poor boy.
May, he's just having a bad day or something. I don't know, but yeah, he's facing back. It'd be fun to know why they do some of this stuff. Talk to Imagineer, like, why is he facing backwards? I have
Yeah.
no idea. He's been facing backwards for a long time. Poor kid.
Yeah, poor kid. But yeah, I agree. That would be a really cool. That, would be well worth the $69 in and of itself for sure. And this tour kind of sounded like it had an identity problem at times, like Disney history, backstage tour. So if you were redesigning it today, which would you lean harder into? That Epcot history, back, the deeper backstage access, or more attraction focused experiences? Would it be the attractions?
Behind the scene, again, I'm a big behind the scenes guys. I can see stuff how stuff operates. Definitely looking at the attractions and going that route with it. Um, and again, I think if they dropped the kind of that talk about Epcot history, maybe for 30 minutes, just Epcot history, because there's so much there, right? Because this is Walt's vision, even though it's completely different than Walt envisioned it. We all know that. But they got it built. So yeah, maybe start off with some Epcot, really deep dive in Epcot history, then start doing a couple behind the scenes at some of the attractions. I think that would be become very popular.
Yeah, I agree too, for sure. That would be super interesting to get to experience. And we'll talk about it next week as we get into more behind the scenes tours. But there is another Epcot behind the scenes tour that is more focused on World Showcase, or there was. And so we'll talk about that next week and maybe how they could potentially combine the two to come up with something that's a little bit of a longer day tour, maybe, or not so much like you said, walking around and talking about or getting like it cracked me up that it's like you get to see the Coral Reef restaurant before it opens. It's like, wow, okay, an empty restaurant with a big fish tank view. Like, I don't know, it's not that exciting. So that was a little like wah wah. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I could walk into a big boy restaurant when it's not open. Oh, that's great. Wow, that's exciting. I'm glad I
Exactly.
did. I
Yeah.
realize it's not big boy everybody, okay, but uh, that's a that's a great place. We go back to Michigan. We love going to Big Boy. So anyway,
If
that's
you've been
another
to
thing
Big
to talk
Boy,
about.
drop it in the comments. I want to know
Yes,
who's been to
yes,
Big Boy.
we love Big Boy.
So that is going to wrap up our part one of this Parks of the Past tours section. Man, this might have to be more than two parts, and we might not get to every single tour that's ever been offered because I'm sure there's some that we're going to miss. But we really want to focus on these big ones and ones that were very popular and lasted for a long time. We're going to try to keep this to two episodes, but we will see. And our would you rather for this week is going to be would you rather spend a day experiencing the massive, all encompassing backstage access of the Backstage Magic Tour or take two smaller, more specialized tours like the Steam Trains Tour and Undiscovered Future World, where you get deeper dives into the specific Disney history and operations. So the one, let's say, Backstage Magic is the same as it was 7 hours at one chunk. And the other one, you could do two separate days of your trip. Which would you pick?
Hands down, it would be Backstage Magic, right? No, I mean it just when I first saw that many moons ago, I just really wanted to do that. Never got a chance to. So that would definitely be one I would still love to do today. And I hope they bring it back. They might.
Yeah, I agree. That would be my choice too. I just think that tour sounds awesome. And it went to three of the four parks. And as much as I think Animal Kingdom has a lot to offer, which we'll talk about when we talk about the present tours, but I think it stands, you don't necessarily have to add that in there. I think it would be too long to add travel to that park. It's a lot farther away from the other parks. So that's just something that I think they had a great layout with the three parks for sure. So thank you so much for listening, everybody, and for being here. We really do appreciate you guys. And truly, every single time we see a new subscriber, a new review, a new follower, a new comment, or even just watching the numbers go up on listens every week, it really does make our day. So thank you for all of that. And we will catch you guys next time.
See you next week.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at Soarin' Around WDW Pod, where we share fun reels, throwback photos, and dive into weekly polls and debates. If you're listening on Spotify, be sure to follow and hit that 5-star button. If you are over on YouTube, subscribe and leave us a comment as well. If you're listening on Apple, a 5-star rating and a written review would mean the world. You can also now support the show through our Patreon at patreon.com/SoarinAroundWDW podcast by becoming a free or paid member and finding exclusive content and bonus episodes and videos there too. Thanks again for joining us. Catch you on the next flight.